Luke 3:1 tells us that in the 15th year of Tiberius, John the Baptist began preaching, and shortly after that, Jesus is baptized. This is a key chronological marker for the ministry of our Lord. I don't think the Holy Spirit dropped this in there lightning. He wanted us to know when it was. The question is, what's the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar? And it's not as straightforward in the literature about Jesus' ministry as you would think. Now, I think I know what the answer is. I think I've known what the answer is for a long time, but there's a lot of scholarly writing on this that obscures it for people. So I'm going to take you through it because I finally decided once and for all, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And this is based on a paper that I published last year in Tyndale Bulletin about the first and second century evidence for what is Tiberius' reign. How did they reckon it? What would Luke's audience have understood? Well, basic facts about Tiberius. He's born 16 November 42 BC. He was named Tiberius Claudius Nero. His mother was Livia Drusilla. His father was Tiberius Claudius Nero. Not the Nero you know. Livia, however, in 38 BC marries Augustus. And in 14 BC, Tiberius is adopted into the Julian family. She is adopted into the Julian family, and she becomes known as Julia Augusta. Okay. Tiberius is adopted by Augustus also, and he's renamed Tiberius Augustus, or Tiberius Caesar Augustus. His new family name is Caesar. That's the family name. Okay. I know Caesar later becomes a title, but for the early emperors, the Julio-Claudian dynasty, that's their family name. When it says Caesar Augustus, Caesar's his family name. Okay. So sometime between AD 11 and AD 13, he's given joint rule of the provinces with Augustus. We know this only from one source. A source we'll be talking about in a minute, Suetonius. Suetonius, in a rather offhand way, when discussing the life of Tiberius, just says, by the way, and he doesn't give an exact date, so that's why we can say between 11 and 13, but somewhere in there, he's given joint rule of the provinces, not of the empire, just of the provinces with Augustus. This is before Augustus dies in 14. Augustus is getting old, needs some help, right? So, his reign. Well, Augustus dies on 19 August, year 14. Tiberius is named princeps, that makes him emperor, by the Senate on 17 September of the same year. So you could maybe do it directly after the reign of Augustus or here where he's officially recognized. And Tiberius dies on 16 March 37. Okay, his age of death is 77 years and 4 months based on the Julian calendar. If you forget about calendars, we use the Gregorian calendar, right? Which is almost identical to the Julian calendar, except for once every 400 years. You remember 2000? You thought it was a leap year and it wasn't? Every time a year is divisible by 400, it's not a leap year, even though you would think it would be. In the Julian calendar, it would have been. The Julian calendar overcorrected by about 1 day every 400 years. So Pope Gregory the Great finally decided we can't have this calendar moving through. So he decreed, we're going to adopt this calendar, and every 400 years, we're going to leave out a leap day. Okay. to make it work. Now, it was adopted very quickly in Catholic countries. Protestant countries took a little longer. When George Washington is born, the English and the English provinces where he was born were still using the Julian calendar. By the time Washington is president, we're all using the Gregorian calendar. They finally decided, well, let's go along. That makes a lot more sense. It syncs up so that the winter solstice and the spring solstice are on the same date every year and all that kind of thing. Okay, so on the Julian calendar, because the Julian calendar was instituted by Julius Caesar. Okay, so when do we begin counting his reign? Well, is it as investiture by the Senate or from the death of Augustus, either one in AD 14? Is it from AD 14? This is used by advocates who believe the crucifixion took place in 33. Is it when he assumed joint reign over the provinces with Augustus? This is used by advocates who want to put the crucifixion in 30. Now, why are these the two most important or the two most popular dates for the crucifixion? Well, you have to have all the players on the field, right? You have to have Pontius Pilate around. You have to have Herod Agrippa around. You have to have all those guys that are mentioned in the Gospels at Jesus' crucifixion around. So that limits the number of years. You have to have a year with a Friday Passover. Well, within that range of years, when all those characters are around, you really only have two choices. Unless you just want to ignore the Gospels, that somebody does. Sometimes they'll say 32 or 31. But the Gospels are clear. Jesus is crucified on a Friday Passover. The only Friday Passovers during that period of years is either 30 or 33. Okay, so when Luke writes 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, is he assuming his readers are going to do this, or is he assuming his readers are going to do that? And then, to complicate matters, Julian calendar is not the only calendar currently in use in the Roman Empire when Luke is writing. Okay, there's the Roman calendar. Everything begins on January 1st. That's the Julian calendar as we know it. There's the Syro-Macedonian calendar, which, like the ancient Hebrew calendar, begins in the fall. There's the Egyptian calendar, which also begins in the fall, but in a different way. There's the Actian year calendar, where you number the years starting with the date of the Battle of Actium, where Augustus defeats, his rival and kind of clears the way for him becoming emperor. So there's the Actian calendar, which also begins in the fall because that's when the Battle of Actium was. And several others, but those are the major players. So that complicates things a little bit, but we'll work through that as we go through. Now, how do you reckon his reign? There's factional reckoning. From the date of start to the end date, counting years, months, and days. If we did this for Tiberius, it'd be 22 years, 6 months, 25 days on the Julian calendar if we begin from 20 August when he's declared emperor. I mean, 20 August, the day after Augustus dies, or 22 years, 5 months, 27 days, Julian calendar, if it begins when he's declared emperor. But less than 23 years. Okay? Now, if you try to date it earlier, as some of them do, you're going to get a bigger number. But this was, if you were listing factual reign, that's what you do. So many years, months, days. And some ancient sources do that. Josephus tries to do this for the emperors. There's non-inclusive, or sometimes called accession year reckoning. The first partial year is not counted, right? So, usually when a monarch dies, doesn't have the courtesy to do it on the last day of the year so that the new king can begin his reign on the first day of the year. So the first year, or the first part of your reign, is going to be a partial year. And if you're just counting in whole years, do you count that as year one, even though it's not a whole year? Or is that your kind of year zero? Well, the non-inclusive way, that's your year zero. When you hit New Year's Day, that begins your year one on the throne. Okay, for Tiberius, this would be 23 years because the last partial year of reign, you get full credit for. Okay, so if he begins in September or August or September of 14, it's 23 years that he reigns. There's also in the ancient world inclusive reckoning where that first partial year you just count as year one, even though it's not a full year. So this is always 1 year more. We know that some of the kings in the Bible counted their reigns this way. So it'd be 24 years if it began in 14. Okay, just to give you examples, okay? So we have to determine which way are they reckoning the years. Now, we know it's sometimes, like Josephus, they're doing factual years. Which of these other two might they use as an alternative? Well, let's go to ancient authors from the 1st and 2nd century to see how they're talking about Tiberius' reign. Tacitus, he lives from about 56 to about 120, okay? He tells us that Tiberius died in the 78th year of his age. That is, he was somewhat over 77 years old. He was in his 78th year, hasn't completed it yet. Okay. He says Tiberius reigned about 23 years. So this is probably rough factual reigning because he uses the word about. Okay. If it were non-inclusive, or accession year reckoning, where you got that year zero, he would have just said 23 years. Okay. Then you have Suetonius, the guy who tells us about that provincial thing. Suetonius, AD 69 to AD 122, writes this Lives of the Caesars, and in Tiberius, book 78 or whatever, section 78, he says Tiberius died in the 78th year of his age. Again, he's 77 plus years old. He says he died on March 16th during the 23rd year of his reign. So this is probably factual reckoning, since non-inclusive wouldn't have used during again. Okay. Cassius Dio, Roman senator, lives a little bit later. 155 to, so he lives into the 3rd century, 235. In his Roman history tells us Tiberius was 77 years, 4 months, 9 days old from his death. He misplaces Tiberius' death on March 27th. Everybody can make a mistake. He was one of them. He reigned 22 years, 7 months, and 7 days. Now, this is actual reckoning from Augustus' death. So the day after Augustus died, he starts reckoning, but it's a miscalculation because he places his death in the wrong day. But that's what he's doing. He's counting back to, we can see where he's counting the beginning of the reign. He's counting back to the day after the death of Augustus. Philo of Alexandria, good Jew, lives from about 20 BC to about AD 50, writes in his work Embassy to Gaius. We all know Gaius, the Roman Emperor Gaius, better by his nickname, Caligula, Little Boots. Okay, that's Gaius. Tiberius reigned 23 years, he says. Now, this is definitely non-inclusive or accession year reckoning. He's not doing the inclusive thing. That'd have to be 24 years. And in fact, what we find in this era, nobody's doing the inclusive thing. They don't do it. Josephus doesn't do it for high priests. Nobody's doing it was around in antiquity, but not in this era in Roman antiquity. So here we have it. He's using 23 years. He probably used the Alexandrian calendar, where the years begin on 1 Thoth, which is 29 September. Now, the reformed Alexandrian calendar was one that Julius Caesar also reformed and made it kind of dovetail with the Roman calendar. But since the Egyptians started their year in the fall, he allowed them to continue to start on 29 September. And he had a way of working leap days in so that by the time that you got to the end of February with your leap days, then the two calendars synced up again for the rest of the year, but they overlap a little bit, right? So this year starts a little bit before the Roman year, but they sync up in a way that he makes them work. But he's probably using the Alexandrian calendar because he's an Alexandrian Jew. Josephus, there's his dates in his Antiquities. He says Tiberius reigned 22 years, 5 months, 3 days. It's factual reckoning from AD 14, but it's a bit of a miscalculation. But you can see he's calculating back to AD 14. See a trend here. Everybody's thinking after the death of Caesar, not this joint rule with the provinces. Clement of Alexandria, now Christian source, in the 2nd century, lives into a little bit into the 3rd. He states that Tiberius reigned 22 years. It's a mistake. He probably means 23 years. Okay, but he definitely doesn't mean the 24 of the inclusive reckoning. Okay, but we know he reckons Augustus, Gaius, and Claudius, those Roman emperors, by the non-inclusive method, so he's probably using the non-inclusive method here. And he just wrote 22 when he should have written 23. Tertullian, another Christian source. And against the Jews, he places Tiberius after Augustus, not overlapping with Augustus. He uses the incorrect factual reckoning of 22 years, 7 months, and 28 days. So again, doing this, he states Christ died during Tiberius' 15th year. He's confusing his death with his baptism. Misremembering Luke, I think. But he gives this year is about, he says he's about 30 years old. Remember, that's what we're told in Luke 3. You can tell he's confusing it with the baptism. But he places this on the 25th March when these two guys were consuls. Now, every year the Romans got 2 new consuls. This was, by this point, an honorary office. And every year there were 2 of them. And so we know which 2 match to which year. That year is AD 29. So he's taking the 15th year to be AD 29, so he's starting in AD 14. You see a pattern here. Everybody's starting in AD 14. Okay, so Tertullian later on and against Marcion said 3 times places the beginning of Jesus' baptism, ministry. Just now he's getting it right. He corrected himself. He had crucifixion. Now, and against Marcion, he gets it right. The beginning of Jesus' ministry in Tiberius' 15th year, he says it 3 times, right? And we already know what he thinks Tiberius' 15th year is. So there we go. So using factual reckoning and reckoning from AD 14 after Augustus' death when Tiberius was named princeps, you have Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and Josephus. You have 3 Romans and a Jew, guys from Rome, a guy from the provinces, guys writing in Latin, guys writing in Greek, but they're all doing it the same way. Then use a non-inclusive reckoning. You have Tertullian, who's probably using Roman civil year because he's good Roman too. Philo probably using Egyptian year, and Clement of Alexandria probably using Egyptian year. But they all agree, AD 14. Now this is all the extant literary sources on this from the first 2 centuries. So we can say Tiberius, contemporaries, and the century beyond or so. They're all dating it from 14. You'd think case closed, but wait a minute. These are all secondary sources, right? They're not primary sources. These are not the primary records. These are guys who are passing the records on, so they're secondary sources. So there's still some wiggle room if we don't go look at the primary sources. We're going to have to look at primary sources. But before we do that, let's summarize. All first and second century sources reckon Tiberius reigned from either the day after Augustus' death or from his investiture in the Senate, both in AD 14, and use either factual years or non-inclusive reckoning. Sources are Roman, Jewish, and Christian. Sources from Rome and from the provinces, all over the empire, all different groups agree. Okay, that's what we have in the literary sources. But we're just talking secondary sources. Primary sources, coins. These record dates, just like our coins do, or things that can be converted to dates. So you have two types of coins in this era floating around the Roman Empire as legal tender. You have imperial coins. These are produced at mints controlled by the imperial house, not necessarily in Rome. These mints are in Rome, but also in some provinces, but they're controlled directly by the imperial house. Then you have provincial coins that are produced in the provinces and not controlled directly by the imperial house. Okay, so these can be dated by honors and offices that the emperor gets. He can be given tribunacia potestas. He can be called imperator. You can give the year of his consulship. Sometimes he's a consul in these consular years we talked about earlier. Now, Tiberius first received tribunican powers, tribunacia potestas, 6 BC under Augustus. Tiberius first received imperatorial acclamation 12 BC under Augustus, and he first served as consul in 13 BC. So you can't use any of those if Tiberius appears on a coin during the reign of Augustus. And Tiberius and others were depicted on coins during the reign of Augustus. Gaius, who Caligula, he appears on coins. Julia, Tiberius' mother, appears on coins. So it's not just the emperor who appears on coins. So none of these are of themselves indication that Tiberius' reign was reckoned from a time before Augustus' death. Just have to keep that in mind. Now here's a coin with Augustus. Okay, the obverse, the head side, says it's the head of Augustus, right? Augustus Divi Fili with head of Augustus. Notice some of these are abbreviated. The reverse, Gaius Caesar Augustus, that was his full name. And it's Gaius riding on the horse. So this is Caligula riding on a horse. He's on the back, but he's not emperor. He's not called emperor. The guy on the front is emperor. He's Augustus, son of the divine. This is how Augustus is referred to on coins almost always in his reign, because Julius Caesar, his adoptive father, had been divinized. Remember emperor worship. So he's called son of the divine. That is son of Julius Caesar. Making sure you know who's the emperor here, not the guy on the back. Okay. Who's just given by his name. Okay, Roman imperial coins. Here's Tiberius on a sestertius issued during the reign of Augustus. The inscription on the front, Tiberius Caesar Augusti, Fili Imperator 5. Now this is Tiberius Caesar, son of Augustus. Remember, Caesar's just a family title. It's not declaring him emperor. Imperator 5. He was given the honor of Imperator for the 5th time, which endured from AD 8 to 10. He's not given any of the titles of the emperor. He's not called Pontifex Maximus, chief priest, which the emperor was. He's not called Son of the Divine, like the emperor was. Okay? But here he is pictured on a coin. None of the coins issued to Augustus' lifetime giving these imperial titles. He's not called Pater Patriae, father of his country, another imperial title reserved for the emperor. And they don't accord him these divine honors. So he can appear on coins, but this coin does not, just as because he appears on the coin, does not declare him emperor. Notice here, we're in this period where people who want to backdate it and say, well, he had joint rules over the provinces, so we can start calling him emperor then, not treated as emperor. Okay, so none of the coins issued under Augustus call Tiberius son of the divine Augustus. Okay, he will be called that after he becomes emperor because Augustus will be divinized. But here we have a coin with an obverse description, Caesar Augustus, son of the divine, father of his country. That's what it says here. So this is Augustus on the front. He's son of the divine, and he's father of his country. Those are titles for the emperor. The reverse inscription, Tiberius Caesar, son of Augustus. There he is. And we're told it's his Tribunacia Potestas 15, which ran from 16 January 13 to 15 January 14, just before Augustus' death. But he's not given imperial titles. He's not co-ruler with Augustus, according to this coin. Note, Augustus had, it's hard to see here, but Augustus had his laureate. Tiberius is not. Do I have the pictures backwards? But there's a laurel wreath on Augustus' head because he's the emperor. Tiberius has a bare head. He's not emperor. There's no hint of joint rulership. For the people who want to back this up to get an AD 30 crucifixion, this doesn't help their case. Now, here's a very similar one. This is a gold aureus like the last one. Those was quite a lot of money, a gold aureus. Caesar Augustus, son of the divine, father of his country, laureate head. On the back, here you have Tiberius with a quadriga, a 4-horse chariot. Okay, Tiberius Caesar, son of Augustus, and we get his Tribunacia Potestas 15, which runs from 16 January 13 to 15 January 14 again. Again, he's not given imperial titles as the emperor. The best you can say about this coin is it depicts him as heir apparent. Okay, that's the best you can say for this. So, coins issued under Tiberius, when he becomes emperor, call him son of the divine Augustus. So here you go, on the obverse sign here, Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus is what it says. There's the Latin, if you want it. The reverse inscription gives his Tribunacia Potestas, and we know the dates of that. So this was issued sometime in the first year after he became emperor. And then there's Imperator 14, which is a bigger span, but this makes it more narrow, but so gives it both. And so this coin has to be issued in AD 14 or 15, just after he became emperor. Looks just like the other one, looks like a reissue of the previous one. But notice how it's reworked. Now he's emperor. Now this is primary evidence, not filtered through some historian. Okay. But these are imperial coins, and the people who try to make this argument will argue, well, it was the provinces who counted from the earlier date, because that's when he had joint rule with Augustus. So what about provincial coins? Well, we'll get there. But coins issued under Tiberius accord him imperial titles and call him son of divine Augustus. So here's another fairly early one. Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus, Imperator 7, so that's sometime between AD 12 and 17. The reverse inscription, chief priest, Pontifex Maximus, Tribunacia, it's 17 September 15 to 16 September 16, by senatorial decree. You see SC, that's Latin abbreviation by senatorial decree. Okay, this coin is issued in 15 and 16, a year or two after he became emperor. He's clearly now being depicted as emperor. Roman imperial coins. 95 known coin types are issued under Tiberius, 61 bearing his likeness and or his name and dated to a specific year. Every year during his reign is attested except for AD 17 to 18 and AD 19 to 20. The reason for this is many of these imperial acclamations are in the middle of a year, so you got to double date the year. Okay, this Tribunia Potestas was given out to other people during Augustus' reign, not just the emperor. Once Tiberius becomes emperor, he's the only one that gets that. He tries to have it conferred on somebody else once, but that guy dies, so he never tries again. And then ever after that, only the emperors get that. So starting with Tiberius' reign, you're only going to see that title for the emperor on coins. Notice where the mints are here. In Gaul, in Rome, and Cappadocia, and in Western Asia Minor. So this isn't just being issued in Rome, even though it's imperial. Other parts of the empire are seeing this on their coins. Now, Roman provincial coins. Less than 1/3 are dated, though the coins from Alexandria tend to bear dates. Alexandria is the exception. They like to date things. Others occasionally date things. Coins issued during Augustus' reign, which bear Tiberius' likeness, do not accord him honors reserved for the emperor or call him son of the divine Augustus. Dated coins from Tiberius' reign range from AD 14 to 15 to the end at AD 36, 37. The whole range. Okay, dated provincial coins come from throughout the empire, all the places where we get coins. No, this is just around the whole empire, east and west, north and south. Here is an example of a coin that's issued at Amisus. The obverse in Greek has Augustus, Sebastus, and it has a head of Tiberius, and the back, okay, of Amisus, year 60. The era of Amisus begins in 31 BC when Augustus declared them a Roman ally city. And that's where they're dating things. But this dates to AD 2930, therefore. And it has the Roman goddess, or the Greek goddess, Dikaiosune, seated holding scales. Of course, she's the goddess of justice. So this is kind of a typical thing you might see. Roman provincial coins, very, very important. Here's 2 coins minted in Syria. Here's a coin minted in Antioch. The obverse says Caesar Augustus, son of Augustus. The reverse has a laurel wreath and reads year 1, the year omitted, but there's a 1 here, that's the alpha, under the authority of Silanus of Antioch, and then year 45. It's dual dated. Now that's interesting. The alpha, of course, is year 1 of Tiberius. This date, year 45 of the Actian era. Year 45 of the Actian era spanned September AD 14 to September AD 15. What's year 1 of Tiberius? AD 14 into 15. Confirm what we saw in the literary sources. This year 1 of Tiberius was reckoned from Augustus' death, 19 August, AD 14, according to a non-inclusive system. Here we have a dual-dated coin, no doubt about what's going on. Similar coin, minute in Seleucia. Again, Caesar Augustus, son of Augustus, laurel wreath, same type of thing. Year 3 under the authority of Selenius Seleucia, year 47. Once again, Actian era with Tiberius. Again, points to year 3 reckoned from the beginning, right after Augustus' death on 19th August 14. So imperial coins are doing this. Provincial coins are doing this. Alexandrian coins. Dates based on Alexandrian civil year that I talked about earlier begin on 1 Thoth, which is 29 September. They begin on 30 September, a year preceding a leap year. That's how you can sync them back up after you get to a leap day in the Julian calendar. Coins are dated all throughout Tiberius' reign, starting in year 3, almost every year, a few years skipped, down to the very last year of his reign, 23 in Tiberius' reign. They imply non-inclusive accession year reckoning because there's no year 24 coins. They don't imply starting earlier because then you'd have year 24, 25, 26. Okay. So again, they imply that the first year is 14 into 15. Roman provincial coins again. Here's another one. Tiberius Caesar, year 23, and on the back, Divine Augustus. Here's Augustus divinized on the back. So the coins correspond to what the literary sources say. Nobody is reckoning Tiberius' reign in such a way that you can get before AD 29 for the 15th year. And therefore, Jesus' baptism, the coins and the literary evidence are implying Jesus is baptized in the year 29, which means he can't be crucified in 30. But what about the inscriptions? This is the other primary evidence, the last bit of evidence we have. So let's go to inscriptions. So Latin inscriptions from before AD 14 that mention Tiberius do not accord him standing as emperor. Beginning in AD 14, Tiberius is mentioned on inscriptions with status as emperor, often as son of the divine Augustus. 49 known Latin inscriptions. At least 39 known Latin inscriptions mentioning Tiberius are datable to a specific year during his reign. You can look them up. Inscriptions span his entire reign from 14 to 37. Okay, Latin inscription from Spain, AD 12 to 13, when Tiberius was joint ruler of the provinces. What does it read? To Emperor Caesar Augustus, chief priest. It gives his tribunius, whatever, my tongue's not working, and his imperator and his consulship. This is how we can date it to 12 to 13. No mention of Tiberius as joint ruler, just Augustus. This is right when supposedly, you should start counting his reign in the provinces according to the advocates who want to date him earlier. It's not, you can't do it. Right there in Spain, where they found this inscription, I think on a mile marker, if I remember correctly. Votive inscription found near Trieste. Emperor Caesar Augustus, son of the divine, chief priest, and gives these other things, calls him father of his country, sacred. And we can date it to 13 to 14. No mention of Tiberius as joint ruler. Now, Trieste is in the provinces. I know it's kind of in Italy yet, but it was in the provinces. okay? Not joint ruler. Latin inscriptions from before 14 that mention Tiberius do not accord him standing as emperor. Beginning in 14, Tiberius is mentioned on inscriptions with status as emperor, often as son of the divine Augustus. So here you go. Here's this North African inscription from AD 14, just after Augustus' death. Translation to Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus. There he is. He's emperor. Augustus is dead. There you go. One of the earliest ones. Oh, this is the mile marker that I was thinking of. Here it is. Tiberius Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Augustus, grandson of the divine Julius. Wow, we're really going all out. Pontifex Maximus, there he is, something reserved to the emperor. And then his imperial honors, okay, and which enable us to date this to 33 or 34, late in his reign. Imperator 9 began in 18 and just lasted a long time. And Consul 5 is in AD 31, so this is all near the end of his reign when this thing goes up. So, first century inscriptions. Greek's inscriptions from before AD 14 that mention Tiberius do not accord him standing as emperor. You see a theme here? Beginning in AD 14, he's mentioned on inscriptions with status as emperor as often as the son of divine Augustus. Now, there's over 200 known Greek inscriptions mentioning Tiberius, but few are datable to a specific year during his reign, with the exception of those again in Egypt. I guess the Egyptians just love dating things. Greek inscriptions from Augustus' reign seldom mention Tiberius. During his reign, Augustus alone is accorded divine honors. Typical title for Augustus on inscription during his reign here is Emperor Caesar Augustus, son of the divine. There you go. Greek inscriptions from Tiberius' reign call him emperor, use titles reserved for the emperor, call him son of the divine Augustus. Here's a Greek inscription from Egypt. Authorized by Emperor Tiberius Caesar, the new Augustus, son of the divine Augustus. Except for Greek inscriptions from Egypt, very few are dated to specific years. Over a dozen Greek inscriptions from Tiberius' reign are dated, and inscriptions come from all these years that we can date. They imply the Tiberius' elevation to emperor by the Senate in AD 14, and they use non-inclusive year reckoning. Here's some inscriptions from Egypt, just excerpts from them. Typical things. Year 14 of Tiberius Caesar Augustus, so sometimes they abbreviate the year. Here they write it out, year 9 of Tiberius Augustus Caesar. These are very typical type of things. So here we go. Calculated from the sources. Factual reign for Tiberius, we have Tacitus, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, Josephus, Roman imperial coins, Latin inscriptions. They have to either be starting here and going through there for his 15th year, or starting here and going through there for his 15th year. But either way, Jesus is baptized probably in the summer, so it's probably, August or September, or maybe July, when Jesus is baptized in 29. Non-inclusive reckoning, Roman civil year, Tertullian probably does this. Again, notice 29. Non-inclusive reckoning, Egyptian year, Philo probably, Clement probably, Alexandrian coins definitely, Greek Egyptian inscriptions definitely. Notice again, September 28 through September 29. So Jesus probably baptized in 29. Non-inclusive reckoning, Actian year, these Syrian provincial coins, they're using Actian year, starting on the date of the Battle of Actium, 2 September. So again, notice we're back here in AD 29. This is important. Luke wanted us to know when Jesus was baptized. He wanted us to know when John started preaching. The only date his audience could have assigned to the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, from all the extant evidence we have, says you got to count it from the death of Augustus forward and end up with Jesus baptized in 29. If somebody gives you a date of 30 for the crucifixion, they are saying we're counting it from the when he had joint rule of the provinces, for which there is zero evidence. It's total speculation. We know when Jesus was crucified, the year was 33. He's baptized in 29. He has about 3.5-year ministry. And we know this from the Gospels. John, has three Passovers. His Passover trips down, and there's another Passover, another spring in there that's mentioned in the Gospels when the disciples are plucking grain in the fields. So you get 3.5 years. He's crucified on Passover in AD 33. Jesus came into the world, the New Testament tells us, at the proper time. And Luke wants us to know what that proper time was. He's crucified, although the Sanhedrin thinks they have control, although Pilate thinks he has control, he's crucified at God's time, not their time. And God's time is AD 33. And anybody that argues anything different hasn't examined the evidence. I got so frustrated with reading the sources. And I said, we've got to go back. And you read all these things about what's 33, it's 30, and they're debating this. Well, what would the people in Luke's day have understood? The only thing they could have understood is John the Baptist starts preaching probably in the spring of 29, and sometime in the summer, Jesus comes to be baptized and begins his ministry. That's what's going on. This, I think, is important because the Gospels are not myth, they're not made up, they're anchored in real history. And that real history evidence has been preserved for us in definitive ways. Our Lord did this all for us, and he did it at the proper time in history. AD 33, crucifixion, resurrection.
So the AD 29 being the day that he was, being the year that he was baptized.
Right.
And if he was crucified 4 years later in 30.
Well, 3.5, yeah.
Okay, so which means that the 3 Passovers that John records.
You have one Passover right after it, then another Passover. Then you have a spring in between the third Passover when he goes down to be crucified. That's John doesn't mention him going down to Jerusalem, but that's if you take you have this incident of the disciples plucking grain in the field. Grain matures in the spring. That's why you bring the first fruits to the first fruit in the spring. That had to happen in the spring. And if you try to integrate that in with John, it can't be with the second or third Passover. It definitely can't be the first one. It can't be the second or the third. It has to be in between them. So now you've got your 3.5 years.
It definitely looks like you've got the good evidence speaking. I just wanted to say that if he's not mentioned as being the son of the divine Augustus, that wouldn't be evidence that he wasn't being given imperial honors. That would just be evidence that Augustus was still alive, right? Because they weren't divinized.
Yeah, but he's also not called Pater Patriae. He's not called Pontifex Maximus. Though he's not given the laurel wreath. None of the imperial things. Yeah. But only the emperor on coins is called son of the divine. You can see this on the coins if you go through the coins of that era. There are websites now that have complete lists of all known Roman coins. Okay. Oxford University has one. The other is Cambridge. I think the provincial coins are at one, and the imperial coins are at the other. Okay, so this evidence is really easy to gather. Again, you know, I wrote a paper on this.
If you say, because I believe it's Irenaeus who puts Jesus' ministry at 1 year, and forgive me if I missed this, talk about it right.
I didn't mention it, but yeah, you're right, he does.
If you take Jesus to have a 1 year ministry, could it be possible 30-year 30 that?
He would have to have a 9-month ministry, not even a year. Because you got to put his baptism sometime in the summer. You could maybe push it as late as the early fall, September maybe. But then he's crucified in March, and not even a year. I defy you. Irenaeus probably was just ignoring John. Yes, I know. That's really weird. Unless Irenaeus believes that John is giving us the same Passover and over. But that's kind of a weird reading of John.
Yeah, and I guess.
Yeah, Irenaeus, that's just a head scratcher is how he comes up with a year. You can't even get a year in the synoptic gospels because you've got this spring in there, right? So Jesus is baptized, and then you've got a spring, and then you've got another Passover when he's crucified. So you got over a year. You know, even the synoptic gospels.
There's difficulty too, because Jesus gets baptized, John gets imprisoned, John gets beheaded.
Right, yeah. So I don't know where Irenaeus comes up with 1 year. That's just a head scratcher to me.
When Luke says he was 30 years old, I guess thinking about being taught in various times and places, that the Gregorian calendar was often just the point around 4 to 6, something like that. But if you do the 29 and about 30 years old, then you get it pretty close.
That's because Jesus was born in 3 BC, just before Herod died in 2. The traditional dating for the death of Herod in 4 BC is based on 1, a mistake in Josephus, and 2, a subsequent misinterpretation of that mistake. I've written or co-written 5 papers on all the various aspects of this. They're all on my academia website. Okay, and I'm not the only scholar. I'm not alone to say this. Okay, there are other scholars who have said this. It's a minority opinion, but I have looked at every aspect of the evidence out there for Herod's death. Herod did not die in 4. He died in 2. Jesus was born in 3. He was about 30 when he was baptized in AD 29. He was somewhere between 29 and a half and 30 and a half. Luke is absolutely accurate. So I wrote a seminal paper on this, published in New Testament Studies. I think it was called When Did Herod the Great Reign or something like that.
He's between 29 and a half, 30 and a half, and it's till the year 29.
Remember, there's no year 0.
Right.
So it's going right into.
You go straight from 1 BC to 180.
Right.
Yeah, so in the year, late in the year 2, I think he's 1, and late in the year 1, he's 2. So, and it works out, trust me. I know, I had to put it on a spreadsheet myself to make it say that it worked. Okay. But yeah, the dating of 4 is totally bogus. I'm here to tell you. It's totally bogus. People have tried to rescue it. There's no rescuing it. I wrote a seminal paper on this, and then my buddy Roger Young, retired IBM computer guy, who was a Rhodes Scholar, really smart guy, who's written a lot about biblical chronology. He has co-authored 4 additional papers with me where we look at every aspect of the evidence of this. with the latest paper just published in Bibliotheca Sacra just this year. Okay. They're all, again, all on my academia website. And if you doubt me, you can go through it. It's, if you want to get down into the weeds, come down into the weeds with me, because I got down in there.
So, so Jesus was born in 3 BC.
Late 3, Herod dies around Passover in 2.
Okay, so here dies late Passover of 2.
Yeah, Jesus turns 1 in late 2, 2 and late 1, 3 and 1. Yeah, just, okay. He's about 30. Luke is absolutely accurate. He's about 30.
And since we're talking about all of this, where does the current research on Quirinius and right? Because for a long time there was a lot of doubt, or I guess doubts about Quirinius and the census and which one was that.
Yeah, I think the best paper published on this recently in scholarly terms in this area is within the past decade. John Rhodes' paper entitled Josephus Misdated Quirinius Census. John Rhodes is a Missouri Synod Lutheran. God bless him. It was published, I think, in the Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society, JETS. I don't remember the issue or date or anything like that, but it's titled Josephus Misdated Quirinius Census. And he shows you that, and this is the funny thing. People who want to challenge the Bible, they take Josephus as if he's inerrant, and the Bible as if he's errant. Josephus makes errors, just like every historian. You, me, and everyone in the room, we all make errors. Okay, and you can identify the errors if you read Josephus carefully.
Most importantly, do you agree with Paul Meyer, or does he agree with you?
He used to be, Paul used to say to me, you've done a really good job, but you haven't convinced me. But lately, and Paul is not what he used to be, unfortunately. Great man. But Walt, his nephew, told me 2 years ago, he says, my uncle told me Steinmann is right. He finally convinced me, because he was wed to the 4 BC thing all along. But he's never said that in print. I can claim that from what Walt told me. I'm not lying, but I can't. Yeah, stamp it on a coin. Paul, Paul is a great advocate for 33 as the year of the crucifixion, and he's absolutely right. He wrote this great article about Roman politics and how they play into this and why they can maneuver Pontius Pilate into doing what he doesn't want to do because of the Roman political scene. Just a wonderful article. Here's again a scholar that the Missouri Synod produced, top flight scholar. We should be very grateful for all the work Paul did. Yeah. Well, I hope I haven't bored you too much.
So 33 AD, what about after the world?
I'd give you the Jewish answer. He wanted to know Anno Mundi, year of the world. Right, this is how the Jews date things. This is, again, a little nerdy, but I think it's important. When people start coming up with schemes to redate things or date things before they should be dated, you got to call them on the carpet. This is not stuff to be trifled with. And I don't think chronology is the be-all and end-all of biblical history, but chronology is important. These things happened in time. Unlike, the scriptures of other religions, our scriptures rise and fall on these being historical things that happened. They tie themselves to God's work in history, and there's historical markers all over the place. And we can assure our people that this is real stuff because the chronology works out when done correctly. It's hard work, but for somebody like me who likes to put his nose down and look at coins on the internet when I should be watching a football game, there you go. Well, it's been, again, as I said, a great joy to be here among you. I thank you for your wonderful discussion questions. I wish you all the blessings in the world on your ministry. And I hope our paths cross again before the Lord either calls me home or calls us all in the resurrection. God bless you all.